Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, the topic is childhood trauma, as I am joined by author Yvonne Sandomier. She went through lots of trauma as a child, including sexual abuse, incest, dysfunctional family, alcohol abuse. So we're going to be talking to her about her story and how everything that she went through, despite all that, she managed to bounce back. And now she wants to be an advocate and a catalyst and help others and show them that they can bounce back no matter what you go through in life. So Yvonne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, as you said, I've been through an immense amount of trauma that not a lot of people experience throughout their lifetime, let alone as a child. From the age of 4 is when I was first sexually abused. And the last time that I was sexually abused as a child, I would have been 14 or 15. And all of the perpetrators that harmed me, they were all different people. And none of the perpetrators have ever been held accountable for what they did to me. My mother did not protect me. My mother did not do things that were in my best interest when she found out about abuse. Rather than press charges, she remained friends with some of the individuals who harmed me. So I grew up in a very kind of upside down world of not knowing who you can trust. The people that you're supposed to be able to trust seem to not really care what's going on with you, or don't seem to have protection as a priority. So because of that, I have probably at least 12 or 13 separate different people that have either raped me, molested me, or harmed me in some way sexually. So for me, it took me a long time to realize that I wasn't the problem. It took me a long time to realize that it wasn't my fault. I blamed myself for a lot of it. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s, I think 35, 36, that I started having really terrible flashbacks and nightmares and depression that I couldn't explain. And it wasn't until a month before I got married to my amazing husband that I actually had a mental breakdown, and I'll call it a mental breakdown. I triggered to the point where I reverted back to a 4-year-old child. I was pulling my hair. I was recalling things that different people had done to me over the years. And it was at that point that my husband, my then fiance, said, "Honey, something's going on. I think it's time that you go to therapy." He knew that I had a tough childhood, but there was a lot that I hadn't told him. And it wasn't until I got into therapy that I realized, oh my God, he was so right. He saved my life. And it was when I entered therapy that I realized that, wow, no, none of that was my fault. I shouldn't have been put in those situations. It's not okay that my mom forgave those people. There is no justification for what those people did to me, because I grew up with distorted beliefs of, oh, he only did it because he was drinking, or, he was on drugs, or, and they would forgive people because they found the Lord, or this or that. And I accepted that excuse for a long time until I entered therapy and I realized, wait a second, there's a lot of people that get drunk and do drugs that don't abuse children. And that is never an excuse. And it was when I realized that I had been taken advantage of my entire life. It was an awakening for me that I can't even describe. And I had always known that I wanted to write my book, but it wasn't until I got into therapy and I started processing all of the traumas. And that's when I said, with the encouragement of my husband and my therapist, it's time that I put my story down, because the fact of the matter is, it's not just my story, it's the story of millions of other people. My experiences are shared with more than 42 million other adult survivors. So, in my own healing, I felt compelled to do something to help others. And so, after I found an amazing publisher for my book, Legacy Book Press, and I had the opportunity to go out on the road and meet other survivors. That's when I realized that this was my calling, to be an advocate, to offer support, to give other survivors a platform to tell their stories. Because so many survivors and so many childhood victims of trauma were silenced. And because they were silenced as children, they are still silenced now as adults. So in April 2021, I started my Survivor Strong podcast. It's a live podcast on Fireside, but it's distributed wherever you can get your podcasts. And it was through there that I started speaking to other survivors and just giving them a platform to tell their story. And it's made me realize how many people are out there that still have secrets. They're still holding on to other people's secrets because of their abuse. And my mission is to encourage all of those people to come forward, tell your story, because you don't have to hide behind the embarrassment or shame of what happened to you, because guess what? It's not your embarrassment. It's not your shame. It's the shame of the perpetrator, the embarrassment of the perpetrator for what they've done to you. And you deserve, and every survivor deserves, to be heard, to be believed, to be supported, and, encouraged as needed. Because the negative after effects of childhood trauma stays with you your entire life. I have people that have said to me, well, it only happened one time, and I was only 8 or 9. So, you know, well, I'm here to tell you that my grandfather fondled me one time when I was 11 years old. And I have never been able to forget that. And I still have flashbacks of that one event, even though other people had done much, much, quote unquote, worse to me, because we want to, put them in categories of what's okay, what's good, what's bad, what's worse. But in reality, trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma. And fondling is abuse. And so it's important not to minimize your experiences. It doesn't matter if it's only one trauma you've endured or if it's 100 traumas. You still have the right to tell your story, and you are still traumatized by that. And you can't compare your story to anyone else, because we are all in our own healing journey. We're all where we are. We're all in our different places.
Why do you feel like your mom didn't do anything, or didn't hold those people accountable, and she forgave them? And what is your relationship like, if any, with your mom, or any of your family members that might have done these things to you?
That's a great question, because actually right now, The relationship with my mother is non-existent. For more than 8 years, I have tried to rebuild a relationship with my mom, giving her the benefit of the doubt that she was just young, uneducated, that she would do things differently now if she was given the chance to do so. But sadly, recently, a family member of mine came forward that my own brother molested her, and my mom is standing beside my brother. So, proof to me that my mother would not do things differently because she's continuing to do it. As to why she didn't protect me and why she forgave them, the only explanation that I can give you is that she was a terrible mom. She didn't protect me. She didn't supervise me. She didn't look after me. She didn't pay attention to who she brought around me. As an example, she welcomed a hitchhiker, that she met at a convenience store that was panhandling and offered him a place to live if he would help out with groceries, etc. And he raped me. She brought these people around me. She endangered me. And none of it would have happened had my mom been there to protect me. So this all happened to me because my mom and my dad, by the way, my parents divorced. And because I lived mostly with my mom, I tend to put most of it on my mom, but my dad was absent as well. I had absent parents, parents that did not put their children first. I've attempted to maintain relationships with people on my mom's side of the family, and I'm actually just reaching a point now where I've decided that I'm not sure I really want a relationship with any of them. And so it's a process. And that's something that's really important for people to understand when you're healing. The relationships that you have with people, they're going to change and they're going to evolve. And that's okay. Because sometimes we have to see people for who they really are before we can really recognize the impact their behavior or lack of behaviors or protection, the effect that it had on us. And I'm learning that it's okay to be angry with your mom. It's okay to be angry. I have every right to be angry with her. And my mom has essentially turned her back on me. I've just recently found out that she's telling people that she's embarrassed that I wrote my book and that I'm telling my story. And so that just makes me want to tell my story even more. And so if you have people that are trying to silence you, I encourage you even more to come forward and say, no, you're not going to silence me, period. It's not happening.
Talk
Yeah.
about some of the statistics of these type of behaviors and childhood traumas. I know you talked about 42 million survivors, but tell people
Yeah.
about some of the statistics and also if they do need help, the resources that they can go through to find the help
Oh,
that they need.
absolutely. The statistics are really alarming. 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be sexually abused by their 18th birthday. And it's important to understand that even though stranger danger is, of course, something that we still need to teach our children, it's not strangers who are most likely to harm your child. The people most likely to harm your child are the people that you know, love, and trust. These are people within your family, within your circle of friends, coaches, clergy members, friends, parents. And so it's really important to evaluate the people that you have around in your circle because 90%, 90% of victims know their abusers. So that's something I want you to keep in mind. Another thing that I want you to keep in mind is that there are red flags that predators in your circle that they will put off. If you have any adults who like to pay close attention to children that are not their own children. They want to spend time with kids other than adults. They may live alone, but you notice they have trampolines or they have video games, things that can lure children in to have them come in and play because that's how it happens. Oh, you want to come in here and play this video game with me? Okay, great. And as soon as they gain your trust, that's when they attack. And statistics show that predators don't wait. Once they have your child alone, they will attack them immediately. And that's something else to remember is that when it comes to gaining trust, perpetrators will gain the trust of the parents before anyone else. Because if they can get the parents to be comfortable with them being around the children, then of course the child seeing the parents being comfortable with it say, oh, this must be okay. It must be okay. But so look out for any people who are overzealous to spend time alone with children. If you have a grown person who wants to take a teenage kid alone to a concert and spend the night out, you need to ask yourself, why does this adult want to take my child alone and spend the night out? Why would they not invite a parent to come along? It's all of these seemingly innocent things that aren't innocent at all. It's just grooming techniques that these perpetrators have, really perfected over centuries of time. Some other signs and symptoms that I want you to be aware of when it comes to your children, that something may have happened to them. If your seemingly calm child, really mild mannered child for their whole life, now all of a sudden wants to get on a motorcycle and go 100 miles an hour down the road, you need to ask yourself why that change in behavior. If your mild mannered child suddenly has intense anxiety or anger or depression, you want to ask yourself why. If their grades drop, you want to find out why. As far as physical symptoms, if boys or girls complain that it hurts to ride a bicycle or sit down, that's a sign. If your child is doing overtly sexual gestures out of the blue, and you know in your home that they don't watch videos portraying those types of things, those types of behaviors are learned behaviors, and you want to find out where they're learning them from. And also pay attention to how your child reacts around other people. If your child recoils if someone tries to come near them, or they refuse to, be alone with someone, you need to pay attention. Especially if it's someone that they previously enjoyed spending time with, and now all of a sudden they don't want to go near that person. You need to find out why. And it's so important not to force them to be around someone if they say that they don't want to be around them. Another thing that you can do to protect your child and start from the beginning with healthy boundaries is you don't force your child to hug anyone, especially family members. And I say especially family members because that's where boundaries start, is within the family. And if a child knows that they can tell a family member, no, I don't want to hug, and that family member will respect it, anyone outside that home has to give them that same respect. And so whenever you go to a family gathering and you see a parent who is like, go hug your grandma, go hug your uncle, your aunt, and the kid's like, no, I don't want to. And they're like, do it, you're being rude. That's not being rude. That's your child telling you what they're comfortable with. And we have to start listening to that and listening to our kids, because they tell us more than we realize. And it's usually done without words. It's done with their body language and their behavior and things of that nature. So, honestly, there are so many different signs and symptoms to look out for. And as far as resources, it's really important. It depends on the state that you're in. You can just go online and Google sexual abuse crisis line in your town. If you suspect abuse, 911, you know, call and make a report. And it's important that if your child discloses abuse and they tell you they've been abused, that you respond appropriately. And how that is and what that looks like is your child comes to you and says, Dad, so and so, they touched me inappropriately. What you don't want to do is, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. I'm gonna go kick their ass. I'm gonna go handle this. No, 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 no. You say, okay, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. Can you tell me more? You first thing that you want to say to them is, okay, I believe you. Tell me more. So they know that you're comfortable, because if they see you get upset, they could feel some guilt that, oh, I can't believe I shouldn't have said anything because now I've upset my parent, when it's not about the parent at all. And so the parent has to take themselves out of it and focus on the child. And you want to let that child know that in order to protect them and in order to do the right thing, that you have to tell the police, you have to report what was done because what they did was wrong. And when a child sees those actions from an adult, that they truly feel supported and heard, and their chances of recovering and healing are, I can't even tell you how much higher than those children who do not have that same support. And so, as far as resources, you can look up the sexual crisis hotline in your city. If it's domestic abuse, there's a domestic abuse hotline, that for your particular city that you can look up. So there are lots of resources out there. There are definitely a lot of resources out there. It's just a Google search away. It really is.
Well, tell the listeners about your book and what they can expect when they read it and where they can get it. The name.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my memoir, The Invisible Girl, is my memoir. And of course, it talks about all of the traumas that I've gone through, and of course, healing from them, and advice on different coping mechanisms that other survivors may find helpful. I do have to say that it's an intense read. I endured a lot of sexual trauma. So I do warn, trigger warning, that there is some, sexual details in there, but I do try my best to be very considerate when going into the detail and describing things that occurred to me. But that is something to be aware of. I would say also that you're not going to sit down and read this in one sitting. It's okay to put it down and come back to it and take as much time as someone may need to read it. And so The Invisible Girl, a memoir, you can find it on Amazon. It's available Barnes and Noble. There's also my website, theinvisiblegirlmemoir.com, where you're able to purchase it, as well as merch for my Survivor Strong podcast, and even some of my own original artwork that you can see here on my wall here, if you can see the video. So if anyone would like to reach out to me, they can reach out to me at survivorstrongpodcast.com. If they would like to be a guest on the show, they can just fill out the tell your story section. Or if they just need someone to reach out to because, they don't have anybody else, they can email me at yvonne.sandomier@gmail.com. And Yvonne is YVONNE.Sandomier, SANDOMIR @gmail.com. And my email is always open and available for anyone who needs to reach out.
tell us about any current or upcoming projects that you're working on that people need to know about?
Absolutely. So in May, I don't have the exact date yet. The Barnes and Nobles in Plantation, Florida, I will be a featured author there. So there will be a day that I will be at the Barnes and Nobles in Plantation, Florida, signing and talking to people, and I may possibly do a reading. I'm also going to be traveling in the future to Chicago for a book festival that is happening there. So all of those details will be up on my website, as things happen.
Okay, and go ahead and give out your website again, and also close us out with some final thoughts, maybe something I forgot to touch on that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts that you have for the listeners.
Absolutely. So my website, again, I'll give you two for my book. It's the invisiblegirlmemoir.com. For the Survivor Strong podcast, it's survivorstrongpodcast.com. My email again is yvonne.sandomier@gmail.com. And for my final thoughts, I want to encourage everyone out there to allow yourself to feel some of those uncomfortable feelings that you may be avoiding. I want you to remember that you are worth every bit of healing. You are worthy of therapy. You are worthy of happiness. You are worthy of love. And you got this. And we are all in this together.
Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen. So if you or somebody else is in need of help, if you're a survivor of these types of trauma and abuse, you can contact Yvonne or Google the information in your city or state, and be sure to check out her website, her podcast, pick up her book, support everything that Yvonne is up to, because this is an important mission. If you have any guest suggestions or topics, cjackson102@cox.net is the place to send them. Please be sure to follow, rate, review, share the show, tell a friend. Yvonne, thank you so much for joining us and having the strength to share your story, not only to my listeners, but people all around the world.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.